Alright, so now we have our door and the animation's been completely removed from it. So let's take a look at animating it and getting it ready for export to Substance for painting. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure there's no like I said, I hadn't made the model itself, so I want to make sure there isn't a bunch of unused nodes. So notice that we have a Lambert 2 here. So the model was just set up for modeling, it wasn't set up for texturing. So I'm going to delete Lambert 2. I'm going to highlight this guy, right click, and I'm going to assign a new material. I'm just going to name this. And remember, the name transfers over to Maya, so I'm just going to name it Science Lab Door. So that's the material node that's going to happen inside of Unity, rather. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to group all of this together. So I'm going to select all of the geo, and I'm going to hit Control G, and I'm just going to name this door underscore GRP, or door group. So all I want to do is I want to create a slider that once I have more control over how far the door opens and closes during the animation. So let's just right click, and I'm going to go to create, NURBS primitive, and I'm going to make a cylinder. I'm sorry, not a cylinder, circle. So create NURBS primitive, circle. And I'm going to just rename this. If you ever need to know the right place, you can hit Control A and rename it here. Master door controller. And sometimes you could just do CTRL and hit Enter for controller. I want to, even though it's freeze, the transform is frozen, I'm still going to go to Edit, Delete All by typing non-deformer history, and then modify freeze transformation here. Now, I want to create an attribute here that when I move my slider, it opens and closes the doors. So I'm going to go to Modify, and remember I'm under Animation here. Modify. I'm going to go down to Add Attribute, and I'm just going to name this Door Open. Actually, we can space this out just for readability, and close. And then the minimum value is at 0, I want it to close. At maximum, at 10, I want it to open. I'm going to go ahead and add. There we go. Now you see that it appears here. So how do we make this so that it actually drives it when we do that? Well, I want this to be my driver, and these doors are going to be my driven. So I'm going to highlight this guy. And what I'm going to do is, under animation, I'm going to go to key, and I'm going to go to set driven key, which is here, and I'm going to go to set. And that's going to open this guy up here. Now, with this selected, I'm going to go ahead and click on load driver, and then I'm going to hit door open and close, and that selects it as my driver. Now notice here it says load driven. Well, let's start off with this guy for my driven. So I'm going to hit load driven, and I'm really only trying to access my one axis. Now remember that X was my forward facing, so you can see that here. So Z is where I want it to, let's go ahead and hit W here. Z is where I want it to move. Now notice that this door and this door is not frozen, so I'm going to go to Modify Freeze Transformations so that it zeroes those out. Let's try that one more time. Actually, you know what? The issue is, the reason why I cannot freeze transformations is because it's in my grouping. Notice that if I go there again, there we go. So let's do Modify Freeze Transformation again. Let's try that one more time. There we go. And so you kind of have to do it a few times. Now the pivot is also off to the side here, which is fine. I mean, if that's where you want it. I'm just going to do Modify Center Pivot, and there we go. And then I'm going to hit G on this guy to redo that. All right, so let's go ahead on 1. Let's start our guy off at 0 here. And because the game itself is pretty fast-paced, I want it to take about half a second, which is 15 frames to open, and then 15 frames to close, because our character is going to hit that trigger, the door is going to slide open, he's going to run right out. So on the Z axis here, which is translate Z, I'm going to load that as my driven. So under this guy here, I'm going to hit load driven, so now I have my left door, and then I'm going to select the translate Z, and on frame 0, I'm going to key that. Now, it's not actually keying on the timeline. What it's doing is it's keying this door open and close controller here. So with 0, this door is on 0. Now watch this. I want this to open way out here, right? Now if I go back to this guy and I type in 10 and I hit enter, you'll notice it snaps back, and that's because it snapped to the last key. So let's select this guy again. Let's move him all the way over outside of here. And with this guy selected on 10, I'm going to hit key again. Now you'll notice I'm clicking my middle wheel here. If I go to 0, the door slides open and close. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Now I still want this to be my driver. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to load that as driven. I'm going to select my translate Z again. And because this is on 0 here, I'm going to go ahead and key that because I want this door to be closed on remember this is door controller 2. I want this to key on 0, so I'm going to hit key. Then I'm going to go ahead and change this first to 10. Notice that door slides open. And I'm just going to move, oops, not this guy. I'm going to select my door, I'm going to move that all the way out here. And I'm going to go ahead and key that again. Now remember, this was set to 10. So now if I go left and right, you'll see this opens and closes. So that's the whole cusp of sort of animating. And the reason why we built out a separate master controller for this is because it gives your animator more freedom. If they want to do things like, like kind of have like a jarring effect, it gives them a lot more smoother transitions.